Hello, hello. Welcome, guys. I love that so many people are already waiting when I log in. It's like, all right, you got 20 people waiting. That's super exciting that you guys are ready to go. And maybe you've already been tasting your wine. I'm not sure. You can let me know. Can you guys hear me all right, by the way? Let me know. Somebody let me know if the sound is working okay. I'll double check my microphone's on. It's on. Andrew, you're thirsty, but can you hear me? You're thirsty. Can you hear me also? Okay, thank you, Deborah. Before I start speaking a lot, it's always good to know that you guys can hear me. So if you haven't already, go ahead, pour yourself a glass, feel free. There's a little static, wind. Oh my God, where could there be wind from? That's funny. Well, I'll hope that that goes away. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why. I'm gonna turn my mic off and on. Okay. Well, I hope it's a little bit better. Kathleen, you're joining from Denver. Hello. I've got other people from Denver here too. I know Tanya's on too. By the way, if you guys want to know how to do virtual tastings well, Tanya and John are the absolute experts. I should probably repeat this when they're there, but I've been doing virtual wine tastings for a year now. And oh, yeah, they are here. Woohoo. Okay. And Pat the Cat's there too. So Tanya has been to, I don't know, Tanya, I think you may have been to every single virtual tasting that I've been doing for the past year. It's possible. And she already sent me a beautiful picture of the Gouda, the samosas, their wine all set up. She always has a really beautiful setup. Sometimes she has her work team over, of course, not nowadays, but she always has her husband and her cat. And Siobhan is a few blocks away. I wish you could be here. Awesome. Dina's here. My sister's here and brother-in-law, Omar. Hi, welcome. Welcome to all the new people who are coming. Oh, Cameron, you're here. Awesome. Oh, good. So, Cameron's a good example, guys. He wasn't able to find the wine that I'm drinking tonight, which is from Washington State, from Yakima Valley, the Sinister Hands from Owen Rowe. But he just sent me a note. Hi, Sarah. That he wasn't able to find the wine and he wasn't really sure what direction to go in. And because I know where Cameron lives, I was able to find a wine at his particular wine store that he'd be shopping from because they had their listings online. And I was able to recommend that to him. So you guys are always welcome to do that. If you have trouble finding the wine, let me know and I will help you. Hello, Nanette. Hi. All right, so we're going to get started. Go ahead, if you haven't already, pour some wine into your glass. And for those of you, if anybody has the Owen Rowe that I'm drinking, I wanted to show you guys this, that it has something at the top of the cork, which is kind of like a little wax topping that they do sometimes. And okay, Heather was the only Grenache available in Worcester, Ohio. I'm glad you got it, Heather. And so whenever you guys find a little wax top like this, you don't have to fret. It's pretty easy to open it. And sometimes the wax will be like all on top of the bottle, like enclosing it completely. And you can just stick your corkscrew in and go ahead and get to the cork. If you have trouble doing that, I'm going to teach you a little sommelier trick, which is I take my hand, which is warm, and I just kind of rub the top of that wax and it melts. It doesn't melt the wax, but it warms it up just enough to be a little bit pliable. And then I can go in with my corkscrew and easily pop out the cork. So if you guys ever have that problem with the bottle, go ahead and do that. Good. All right. Hi, Barbara. It's your daughter's account. I love that. Hey, Vivian, Chris. Good. Oh, Barbara, it's so nice to see you again. Barbara and I worked together years ago and drank plenty of wine together. Craig, wonderful. So go ahead, pour some wine in your glass if you haven't already. And for this moment, and this moment only, go ahead and just pour yourself a little bit of wine because we're going to want to swirl it. We're going to do some smelling and stuff like that. And so it's helpful if you don't pour too much into your glass. If you've already been drinking for a while and you already have a lot of wine in your glass, then go ahead and drink that wine so that you only have a couple ounces left and you can drink it this way or taste it with us this way. So cheers, by the way, to all of you. I'm going to do my little virtual wine tasting trick of doing a toast with my own bottle. But if you have somebody there, go ahead and toast them. It's a very important part of wine tasting is taking a moment to celebrate. And For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dini Rao. I also go by Dini Vino, and I'm a wine expert. I've been doing wine tastings for the past 23 years. I've been guiding wine tastings. I've worked as a sommelier. I worked at Christie's Auction House, and I've done a lot of online wine sales as well, and helping Amazon start their wine department and some other things. But what I really love doing is this. I love teaching people about wine. I love talking to people about wine, and of course, drinking wine with you. So I started this company doing virtual wine tastings a year ago, and I do all sorts of things to help you have your own wine tasting experiences in your home with your friends when you can do that again and stuff. So today's tasting is all about the grape Grenache. I chose Grenache because it is an incredibly resilient grape variety. And I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the grape variety, where all it's grown around the world. We're going to taste it together and go through like some of the elements that tell me that it's Grenache, some of the things that are typical of Grenache. And we'll go through food pairings, of course. I hope you guys are able to find some good snacks to go along with your wine. And then we'll have some time for questions, hopefully, along the way. So just type in your questions whenever you have them. And no second glass tonight. No, Andrew, I forgot to bring over my tumbler. I like to have my tumbler too, so I can show you guys how to swirl in both glasses, but I didn't do that tonight. But we have a lot to cover. I don't even know if we'll get through all this because this is just a free mini tasting. I also do private tastings, longer tastings for an hour or 2 hours where people hire me. I'm doing birthday parties. I'm doing corporate wine tastings for people. I did a date night for a couple of the other nights. So all sorts of different things that you can hire me for as well if you want a little bit more. And Nithya and Dave are here too. Amazing. I love it. I have so many family and friends and a lot of new people here. And thank you guys all for trusting me for this tasting. So, okay, like, did I get through all of those things? Yeah. I think I gave you all the basics of it. So let's go ahead and taste the wine. And as we taste it, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the grape variety Grenache too. But most important is to taste. Okay, hello from Sacramento. Perfect. And Evaristo, thank you for putting in the wine that you're tasting. If you guys want to all drop in the wine that you're tasting, I know not everyone was able to find the Owen Row from Yakima Valley in Washington, but I'd love to know what you're tasting, and then I can incorporate some of the things that you might be finding in each of those wines as well. One of the really cool things about Grenache is it's pretty ubiquitous these days. You can find it in so many places around the world. It's so cool. I mean, I think I mentioned to you, it's all over Spain. Spain is kind of where it originated from as Garnacha. It's in the south of France. It's a lot in Châteauneuf-du-Pape and many of the Côtes du Rhônes that you drink. It's in Sardinia, where it's called Cannonau. It's all over Australia now. Actually, it's probably blended in a lot of the Shiraz that you drink in Australia. It's been in South Africa for a long time, throughout California and Washington State, and I'm sure many, many other places I'm not even remembering, but it's truly all over the world. Very exciting. And it's in a lot of rosé. That's the other thing I forgot to mention in the email is that if anybody wanted a Grenache rosé, that would be most welcome too. All right. You guys got a lot of Spanish wines going. Perfect. Campo Viejo, right. Rioja has a good amount of Grenache blended in. So go ahead. I don't always say to pay attention to the color of the wine, but if you guys have like a white surface, like a piece of paper or something like that, and you tilt the wine away from you, you can kind of get a glimpse of the color of this wine. And it's interesting to do that with Grenache because you might notice that it's a little bit lighter in color than your typical red wine that can be like really inky and, like a Cabernet Sauvignon that's so dark in color. These tend to be a little bit lighter in color. And then go ahead and get that swirling action going. If you're having trouble swirling and you're worried about spilling it everywhere, A, have a little less wine in your glass. And B, you can just draw circles with the stem of your glass and give it a really good sniff. So good. Ooh, fascinating. You guys are drinking all sorts of stuff. Okay, Barbara, so far you have the one with, I think, probably the highest percentage of Grenache. She's got 90% Grenache going. Oh, lovely Santa Barbara Grenache that Craig is drinking. So when you're swirling it, you're really volatilizing all of those smelling compounds. You're making them come alive. So a lot of people just kind of like swirl and swirl and swirl. And you could look at the legs of the wine. We're not going to talk about that today. But the important thing is when you're swirling to really get your nose in there and smell it. And I always like to smell it when it's still before I've done all the swirling action and then do some swirling and smell it again. And you can see what a big difference it makes, right? We did some of that last week. And then take a moment to pause. Um, think about, do you enjoy the smell of this wine? Is it interesting to you? How intense is it? Or is it not very intense? And does it bring up any memories? Okay, now let's give it a taste. Just taste it the way you normally would and just sip it. And now I want you to take a sip of it and taste it the wine taster's way, which we're going to suck in some air, kind of like the reverse of a whistle, holding our tongue like a little trough where it holds the wine, and take the wine into your mouth so you can send all the aromas of the wine up into your nose so you can smell it as you're tasting it. And you're going to get a much different experience of the wine. And aside from just getting an experience of whether or not you enjoy the wine, which I think is a very important question to ask yourself and pause with, but you can also think about what are the things you notice first about the wine. Is it the pucker that you get on the sides of your mouth? That would be the acidity level of the wine. Sometimes you'll get in wines a lot of the drying effect that you get in black tea. Those are the tannins of the wine. Usually in Grenache, you don't get a lot of tannins. It's usually on the softer side of like low to medium kind of tannin. So it's not like super, super drying your mouth out, but it depends on what your Grenache is blended with. You also won't get a lot of acidity. It's kind of on the lower or medium to side of acidity, typically as a grape variety. And the other thing you can pay attention to is the body. And body, I always give people the comparison of milk. If you think of like a skim milk, that would be more like a low-bodied wine or a lean wine. And if it's more like a heavy cream or a milkshake and it's feeling its weight in your mouth, that would be a full-bodied wine or a heavy-bodied wine. And usually Grenache will be on the fuller side of things. It has a little bit more alcohol. You might even feel the heat of the wine in your mouth, like it kind of evaporates quickly and creates that heat sensation. And that's a sign of the alcohol too. So Grenache tends to have higher alcohol, higher body, lower acidity, and lower tannins in general. These are generalizations. The acidity might be more like medium in the middle. And then there's the ripeness level. Depending on your wines, I think pretty much everybody that I've seen as I scan through here has a warm region. Some of you have like higher elevation, higher altitude wines, but for the most part, they're all really warm places. And that is very typical of Grenache. I told you it's a really resilient grape variety. So Grenache grows in places where people think like, oh my God, how am I ever going to make wine in this place? So it grows in places that are very hot, arid conditions where, normally you'd have to bring in and irrigate a lot of water to keep the vines healthy. But with Grenache, you can actually get away without doing that as much or at all. And it also stands up to really windy conditions. So, in the south of France, in the Rhone Valley, where there's a lot of Grenache grown, there is a wind that's famous there called the Mistral wind. And that wind just picks up and it just hammers the vines. And it has a very drying effect on the vines. And Grenache is one of those grape varieties, those vines that just stands up to it. And when you see some of the really old Grenache vines, they're gnarly and just kind of like tangly and everything like that. But like they've stood the test of time. They've been there for 100 years and they're still going and they're still producing wine. So for that reason, I thought it would be a very appropriate wine for us to have in these times, something really resilient like that. Okay, Evaristo asks, do you breathe through your nose as well? Higher alcohol is always a good thing, right? Do you breathe through your nose as well? I'm assuming you're asking when you taste the wine. Is that what you're talking about? I'm going to pause for a second. Nope. When I'm tasting it and sucking in the air through my mouth, I'm not breathing through my nose as well. Mostly because I'm not really coordinated enough to do both at the same time. But I'm mainly sucking in the air through my mouth. And by doing that, it sends the aromas up through my nose, through my mouth. So there's actually a mixture of your saliva that goes with it that will change the experience as well. So it is very different than smelling the wine just in your glass through the air. Good. Okay, that is what you're asking. And higher alcohol is always a good thing. So good. Now you've discovered Grenache that you can go to oftentimes with higher alcohol, but it doesn't knock you over the head. I don't know. For me, well, for many reasons that we'll go through, I just really enjoy a good Grenache. And I find them to be really food friendly because they don't necessarily have all those tannins that knock you over. And especially, I know somebody last week, Kiku, if you're here, was asking about pairings with Indian food. And so Grenache is a fabulous answer to that for those of you who love drinking red wine, because there's not a lot of those drying, astringent tannins that we talked about that dry out your mouth. And so, but there is a lot of that really nice fruit quality to it. I wanted to call out Lynette because she's doing a great job of calling out something that she actually experiences in the wine. And I know that's tough to do in the beginning, but if you guys just start doing it and practicing it, you're going to get better and better at it. So Lynette smells dried apple in hers. And I don't remember which wine you had. I'm trying to scroll up to see, Lynette, which wine you had. So does everyone taste differently due to saliva, like how perfume is different on each person? Absolutely, Lynette. And this is like, I don't know, I could go on the whole time about this topic because, people always like to make it sound like there's good wine and there's bad wine. And my philosophy is that really it's more like, what do you like in wine? The whole goal is not to find a good wine, it's to find a wine you will like. And we all experience wine differently because of this factor of our own body chemistry that interacts with the wine. That's going to be completely different for you versus me. And that's also why, even when it comes to food pairings, I can give you some recommendations, but really more, I like to give you a methodology for how to think about the food pairing so that you can come up with something that's going to be good for your taste. So Barbara's getting chewy but juicy blackberry cherry. Yeah, exactly. I'm getting tons of cherry. Again, I don't know exactly which wines you guys are all tasting, but I also wanted to mention that in addition to rosé, you'll also find Grenache in some dessert wines. So if you guys like red dessert wines, kind of in like a port style, you'll find wines like Banyul and Rastau, and they're really yummy, delicious dessert wines that you guys can have with chocolate. They're really good with chocolate desserts, or you could always have it just with like a cheese plate or something like that too. Cool. All right. So the last step in the tasting process, not in our whole tasting, but the last step in the tasting process is to pay attention to that finish. So you looked at the wine, you smelled it, you tasted it in your mouth as you smelled it in your mouth, and then you swallowed the wine, most likely, I'm assuming. And you want to pay attention, maybe you want to do it again right now. You want to pay attention to how long that finish lasts with you, like really even how many seconds you could count it out. And then think about, is it pleasant? Is it complex? Am I getting a lot of different things in there? Or is there kind of one taste that overwhelms it? Some of the very best wines that I've ever had are wines that linger with me for a long time, but they kind of are ever changing. I'll never forget one of my greatest, a lot of wine people talk about their aha moments where they like finally understood that wine is this like incredibly complex and fascinating topic aside from just being a beverage. And an aha wine for me was when I was working at a wine shop now 20 years ago, and I was stocking the shelves and I went in the back to taste a wine. Somebody said, "Oh, you got to go taste the wine back there." And I tasted the wine and then I went back out to go stock the shelves. And I was like, what whoa, like it just kept hitting me in waves. It was like a rainstorm with violets in the air and, dew. And it was just like over and over. I kept getting these various flavors that it kept morphing into. That was an old red Burgundy from Boguay, a Musigny, by the way, in case anybody wants to know what that wine was. So Deborah says, a salesperson at the store today told me that Grenache is rarely the only grape in a bottle. Can you comment on this? Absolutely. So there's a funny story behind this, but let me also answer the question briefly first. The grape Grenache is usually blended because of the factors of it being a lighter grape variety, like it's not that deep dark color, it doesn't have all that tannin, so there's not always like a lot of substance to Grenache, and and so a lot of times it'll get blended in so that you can have those other components to it. Like, for instance, in the Rioja region where Grenache is pretty famous, a lot of times it's blended in with a grape called Tempranillo. And the grape Tempranillo is a delicious grape variety, but it is really like muscly. It's a very masculine grape variety. It's like really powerful. It's muscly. It's angular. It's like tannic. It's like it's in your mouth and it's very heavy and present. And so then when you blend in the Grenache, it adds like a little bit of the lightness, the juiciness, the aromatics, all of those other components to it. So Grenache is a really good blending grape variety for that reason. There are some producers, like one producer in the Châteauneuf-du-Pape region in the south of France in the Rhone Valley, Chateau Reyes, it's called, that does like primarily Grenache in their blend, where normally Châteauneuf-du-Pape is a blend of all these different grape varieties. So there are some people that will do it, but it's you really, really have to pay attention to how are you going to get that wine to be, yeah, Craig, oh my God, Reyes, how are you going to get that wine to be like great, and pay attention to extracting as much of the tannin and structure that you can get from Grenache if you are going to go for it on its own. So I hope that helps. And of course, it's also blended a lot with Syrah, which is another bigger grape variety that you'll find. It's probably blended in a lot of things that you don't even realize. I bought it, funny enough. So Astor Wine, I bought my wine to Astor Wine, this Owen Roe, the Sinister Hand, and they had listed this as a Grenache, and then I got it, and it turns out to only be 63% Grenache, and I was like, "Whoa, that's interesting." They're not allowed to put that on the label because I think it has to still be at least 75% in order to have the grape variety on the label, but it's on the back, so they tell me that. If anybody knows the exact percentage now that it has to be, let me know. These are the details that I've forgotten in too many years of wine tasting. So, okay, what else did I want to tell you guys about? So, I am going to tell you a little bit. Does anybody have this wine that I have? I wanted to tell you a little bit about it, even if you don't have this particular one, the Owen Roe, um, because it's from Washington State. And a lot of people, I used to live in Washington and Seattle when I worked for Amazon, and I used to pretty much every week for many, many months would drive over to the wine regions in Washington because I was working with a lot of the wineries there. And it always shocked people when I told them that the Washington wine regions do not get rain. Everybody always said, like, well, Washington State, how can Washington have a lot of wine there? How can it have good wine there? Doesn't it rain a lot? Because we all think of Seattle. But oh, good. Sarah has this wine. Fabulous. Yeah, my New Yorkers probably have this wine. And the funny thing about Washington State, for those of you who know it, as soon as you drive past the Cascade Mountain Range, as soon as you get past there and going eastward on 90 or whatever, you are going to have a whole different landscape. It goes from, like rainforest-esque Seattle to complete desert plateaus and everything like that, especially by the time you get out to Walla Walla, where there's a lot of winemaking out there. And this isn't quite that far. This is in the Yakima Valley, but certainly tons and tons of sunshine. They actually have to irrigate a lot there in order to get enough water for the grape varieties, but they really get like a lot of beautiful ripeness out of the wine. So it's kind of a fun thing. If you guys have not had wines from Washington State, I recommend it. And this producer is an interesting one. They're Irish immigrants making wine. They chose not to come and make beer. They chose to come and make wine, but it's kind of cool. So if you guys have Questions about your specific wines. Oh, okay. Here, Science Club 408. Do Grenache age well? Should we find older bottles or drink it younger? My 2016 is very good, but the store also sells a 2013. Should I get it? Okay, so there's a couple ways I want to answer this. For one thing, whenever people ask me, should I age a wine? I always say, go ahead and figure out if you like aged wine, first of all. So when I used to work at Christie's auctions, we would have a lot of clients who went out and bought all this wine and they listened to the wine critics about, the perfect time to open the wine. And so they laid all those wines down. They didn't touch them. They were waiting for that perfect window and that moment to open the wine. And then they would go to open it years later to find that they didn't really like the wine as much as when they bought it. And that's because wine changes over time. And goes back to the whole idea of like one moment in time isn't better than the other. It's really about personal preference. So I think everyone should do the experiment of going out and buying a wine that's already been aged to taste it and see if that's something you enjoy. Because basically, what happens to the wine is it starts out very fresh and young and vibrant and sometimes tannic. And over time, it kind of mellows out. It softens. The fruit quality changes from being a very ripe cherry, whole different flavor profile. You'll get, probably more what we call secondary or tertiary aromas. You might get herbal spices like leather, like used leather, all sorts of funny things that people always laugh at the wine people saying, but it's a very different taste. So go out and figure out if you like that. And then assuming you like that, then Science Club Grenache isn't particularly one of the grape varieties in general that ages really well. It loses its color very quickly. So, mine is a 2016 as well, and it's still pretty red. But if you went to 2013, you'd already start to see some brickish, like some orange tones in the wine for sure. Even you might even be getting some orange tones in the wine you're drinking now, depending on if it was aged in some oak and exposed to oxygen. And all of that said, there are exceptions to that. So Chateau Reyes that I mentioned and Chateauneuf du Pape, those wines will certainly age for a long time because they've made them in a very specific way to preserve the structure of that wine. And I guess the other thing that I didn't mention is that there are a few things that make a wine age well. And one of those is that it really needs structure for the wine to be able to age well. So there's got to either be, that fruit intensity really helps it. So Grenache does have that, but also often tannins will help it age well because tannins are a good preservative, as is acidity or sugar. So that's why sweet wines, if you ever see sweet wines, they will last for like hundreds of years. Alcohol too will help it age. So Grenache does have that going for it. So yes, Grenache will age. It will age well. It will probably drop off faster than, and depending on what it's blended with too. Say it's blended with some Tempranillo, as in many parts of Spain, that's going to age for a very long time because Tempranillo's got that strength, that backbone for it. That is a sad story, Lynette. Oh, darn. I don't even remember which was the sad story. Good. Okay, good. I'm glad Science Club. I don't even know. Oh, Sinise. Okay, maybe it's not Science Club. Sorry if I say anybody's names incorrectly. And we're almost at the time. So if you guys have any more burning questions about Grenache, oh my gosh, we didn't even get to like the food pairings and all that kind of stuff. If you guys are tasting it, if you got the samosas, like I know Tanya did, go ahead and taste that with the spice. I think that's going to be really super delicious. I also think I have it with my aged Gouda, and I'm really enjoying that as well. One of the ways that helped me come up with the Gouda pairing is when I have aged Gouda, I kind of crave like a jam, like a blackberry jam or some sort of cherry jam. And that's kind of what I get in this wine. So it's one of the ways that led me to this kind of wine is that the Grenache wines can be really nice and juicy. So I thought, oh, that's going to be a nice contrast with my Gouda. On the other hand, I came up with a combination of doing the Indian samosas because when I tasted the wine, I thought, you know what? This would go really well with some spicy things. There's some like orange rind. There's definitely some spice in this wine too. There's some like pepper that you're probably getting, especially everyone with all the Spanish wines. You guys are probably getting some of those spices, and that also points to me to wanting some food with a little bit of spice to it too. So that's the way I like to tell you guys the way I come up with those food pairings so you can go and replicate that in your own lives when you're thinking about what to eat and drink together. Okay. Ooh, yum. I'm glad. Good. All right. So I want to tell you guys we're at time now, but I want to tell you I'm doing a very special tasting. It's going to be on Instagram. I don't know if everyone here is on Instagram, if you're an Instagram crowd, but I'm doing an Instagram live that's going to be a week from this Saturday. My grandmother passed away at 90 years of age in India this past week, and she was an incredible cook. She lived in many parts of the world. She lived in Africa, she lived in Brunei. And whenever she lived in different parts of the world, she would pick up some cooking techniques and flavors from those various places. So I'm going to be cooking a eggplant curry dish, a Sri Lankan Ceylonese dish. Sarah, by the way, Sarah's from Sri Lanka, her family is. And it's going to be in tribute. It's just going to be probably a 30-minute tribute. It's going to be cook along. So if you guys RSVP to it, I'll send you the recipe in advance and you can cook along with me. I'm also going to have some special guests of family members joining to be able to share some of their stories about what an incredible woman my grandmother was. And yeah, if you'd like to, please join me. I will send out the invitation to that. I'd love to see you there. So thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you guys all. Thank you so much. This is like really, really such an honor that I continue to be able to do this and that you guys all show up for this. So I thank you for that. I hope you've enjoyed it and that you will join the next one. Bye bye. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to wait till I get the last comments. Okay, good. I think we're good. Love Grenache. Good. I'm so glad that you guys love Grenache. Me too. I love Grenache too. All right. Thank you so much. Good stuff. All right. I'm going to go and enjoy my Grenache. You too. Cheers.